Hey, for the month of October, our group in Goodreads, the science fiction book club, one of the things that we read. So again, we read two novels per month. One of the things that we read is Roadside Picnic by the Russian Strugatsky brothers. It's a classic science fiction novel. It's a cool novel, but I'm not gonna review this one because I don't have a. I'm still hunting for a physical copy of it. It's in my Kindle. So what I'm gonna review is the other book that we read, which is of course the very awesome The Rise and Fall of Dodo or D.O.D.O by Neal Stephenson and Nicole Galland. Neal Stephenson is a fairly well-known science fiction author. Nicole Galland, I haven't read anything from her, but she does historical fiction, I believe. So this was released last June or July 2017, just this year, and I've been hunting a copy for this one, which is something that is very hard to do in my country in the Philippines because typically our bookstore here, the science fiction sections, they only sell books that have the fairly famous ones or books that have been made into movies. Like so, before I was looking for like copies of like Orson Scott Card's Ender's Game, or let's say, Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep by Philip K. Dick? Nothing. But then when the Ender's Game movie came out, then you have like the entire set of Ender's Game or the complete series, or when Blade Runner 2049 came out, then like Philip K. Dick works became they began cropping up, which is sad. So it's like they do not risk, or they do not take they do not invest in like selling fairly underground titles, or lesser well-known titles. But of course you can't blame them because I think the market's really not um, uh, that strong, when it comes to sci-fi. So luckily last August this year, I had a conference in Singapore to do with particle physics, and in the Changi airport, I believe it was called the Relay bookstore. In their like recently released section, I found this there, and so I automatically grabbed a copy. This one is the Neil Stephenson's most recent novel, which came right after Seven Eves, which coincidentally we also did a group reads of last year. I believe it was June 2016. We read it in the group. A very, very amazing title. So that last book, Seven Eves, is it's a sort of a bit gloomy, sort of melancholic work about a post an Earth facing an impending doom, and humanity trying to survive. This one is the exact like opposite to that, in a sense that this is a bit humorous, and a bit over the top, and so on. And I don't know, maybe due to the presence of Nicole Galland, the signature of Neil Stephenson, his way of dumping information and non-stop technicalities about the science behind it. It's a bit toned down here. So not saying that it's not there, it's still there, but it's a bit toned down. But it's still very interesting nonetheless. So the premise of this book is that this you have this organization known as D.O.D.O, D.O.D.O, Department of Diachronic Operations, and the main character, Melisande Stokes, she's a linguist which was hired by a military man, former physicist Tristan Lyons, to like decipher certain documents because they observed that in these documents prior to 1851, specifically July 28, 1851, there were a lot of references regarding something called magic, and in fact these witches, that magics really existed. But then in 1851, the documents, the references to magic began slowing down, and then eventually it died in like July 28, 1851. And so they began investigating what caused it, and the main cause that attributed to the decline of magic was, of course, the invention of photography, in particular when the solar eclipse on July 28, 1851 was first photographed. And so Tristan Lyons has this hypothesis that what the witches could do is in fact, of course, not magic at all, but rooted in something. The mechanism behind it is, of course, something very scientific. So he dabbled with the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics, and in fact, if you've read some quantum mechanics like the famous Schrodinger's cat, so you have a cat who is in a state of alive and dead, not or. So unless you open it, unless you observe it, the wave function could either collapse into a being dead or being alive. But unless you observe it, it could be both. And the thing is, quantum mechanics is probabilistic, so every time you experience such crossroads, you don't really the choice of whether the wave function will collapse to a certain possibility or the other is probabilistic. And Tristan, the main character here, thought that the what made witches different is that they actually have this freedom with no, due to some unknown mechanism that could allow them to choose such collapse. Okay, so if they can like choose for certain whether the cat will be dead or will be alive, instead of it being probabilistic, then for all intents and purposes, it would appear magical. So the problem is, in the existence of photography, they lose that freedom because the way they explained it is when you take a photograph of something, you're recording its instance so that the photograph itself collapse, right? That instance, thereby depriving the witch of any freedom of like choosing another possibilities or another path in the many universe interpretation. So that's what happened. And so they attempted, so this organization, what they want to do is they will now attempt to like stop the 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 wane or the decline of magic, the disappearance of magic. And what they did is they tried to theorize that if you can build a device, that could prevent decoherence, that could uh, let's say isolate a certain witch or a certain person capable of choosing between these possibilities, then maybe they can perform magic again. So they did those things, and it the plot went like overboard from there. So a lot of like time travels and so on, Vikings going to the era of the Constantinople, the Crusade, Victorian era, and so on. Very very mind blowing. And the thing that I like about Neil Stephenson and these types of science fiction in general is they don't shy behind a scientific explanation. It's not merely groups of people and then what they will experience with a different environment. No, the science is there. Sometimes what I hate about like modern science fiction, sometimes like Leviathan Wakes, yeah, it is futuristic, it's science fiction, but it's not like hard science fiction where it's not the only thing that's making it different from realist type of fiction is that the setting is just different, but how people behave and so on is still the same. But here there's really a specific instance or a specific phenomenon that it's the mechanism, the science, the author is not afraid to like to present it, and to expound on the implications and so on. So Neil Stephenson has been a fan of the many worlds interpretation. So it's a key plot in his novel Anathem, another brilliant novel. And what I like about the most also about D.O.D.O is the fact that it's like a parody or a satire of when you create a department or a bureaucracy, all the paperworks behind it. And this is like a lot of insane synonyms and abbreviations like deeds, doers, bojack, and so on. And so it's so brilliant, it's so funny. So it's definitely a must read if you're like a fan of Neil Stephenson, or a fan of like hard science fiction. So the science fiction here is on a lighter side, as compared to the usual Neil Stephenson works, but it's still very amazing. So this is the my review of the rise and fall of D.O.D.O. So next, currently I am reading this web serial known as Worms. Initially, I thought it was fantasy, but it looks interesting. Okay, so but it's very long though. So, but that's it with the rise and fall of D.O.D.O. And until next time, yeah.